So with my first book, I was super proud of it when it was first published. I felt like I had accomplished this lifelong feat, but oh boy was I wrong. I'm gonna tell you what I did that were mistakes, and if I had it over again, I would have done this. Number one, it was a nonfiction book that I had written for a group of youth where I was a camp counselor for the summer. And it was pretty much self-improvement on how to survive high school and the peer pressures. Basically how to get out of there alive and keep a good head on your shoulders and be a good person. Because let's be honest, when you're a teenager, high school, middle school, it's all very trying times. Socially, it might be the most challenging period of your life. So number one, it was a nonfiction book. I thought it was gonna be a pamphlet, but it turned out to be long enough to be a book. And I was really just regurgitating what I had been taught. I didn't really own the thoughts and the beliefs that I was expressing. When I was in grad school, we called this regurgitation. I was regurgitating it. What that means is it's like eating something and then vomiting it out when it's half digested. So I was taking things that older people had said to me. I thought that it was from me when I wrote it down on paper. I still think that it was good advice for kids at that age at that time. But I taught high school for a while and I let some of the high school kids read it, and we read it out loud as part of the literature class, and I felt my face flush red quite a few times because I was embarrassed, because if I had it over again, there's a lot of things in that book that I would not have written. It's stuff that I would not have taught. It's stuff that I would not have said. Now, one of the things I'm going to tell you at the end is a good way to get around this is to write a fiction, write something that's supposed to not be true, write a novel. And you can have certain characters say the things that you want the reader to understand. That way, if some years later you're embarrassed by those words, that's what that character said at that time. You can take a true story and change the names of the characters, the locations, the time period, the context. If it takes place in Nashville, Tennessee, you can make it take place in Houston, Texas, and no one will know the difference. Number two, the book cover photo and the author photo were photos taken by friends. I wish that I had saved some money together and hired a professional to do that. Number three, the development editor that helps you with the story, the copy editor who looks at grammar, syntax, word choice, word structure. Third is the proofreader who just goes through and makes sure that everything looks good after the development editing and the copy editing. Those need to be done by 3 different people, and I had the exact same person at the literary press do it for me, and I paid her. That's not good, because not only do you need multiple eyes on it, there's not a single editor that's perfect on all 3 of those categories. Now, my copy editor today sometimes gives me ideas for the development after the development is already finished, and most of the time she's right, but I do not let her be the development editor and the copy editor and the proofreader. My 4th mistake, I didn't have an ISBN, International Standard Book Number. You can take the ISBN and you can type that into the search engines and you can find a place to buy that book. This right here is the ISBN barcode and number. I didn't put an ISBN on it because back then they were too expensive. And honestly, I'm glad I didn't, because now I'm glad that that book is no longer in circulation. I'm glad you can't find it and buy it, because I'm kind of embarrassed by it. Number 5, a amateur literary press printed it for me because we didn't have Amazon, we didn't have print on demand back then. If I had it over today, I would either try to get a publisher to buy it or I would publish it myself through Amazon. I'm really big on self-publishing. I'm not so big on trying to get your book published anymore, because a major publisher offered me 10 grand for my first novel, The Mason Jar, but I'd already made $10,000 selling it myself. And I had completed an internship at a production company that did music videos and commercials, and were getting into feature films. And I learned producing, directing, and screenwriting. So not only were they going to keep the paperback rights, but the ebook rights, the hardbook cover rights, the film rights, everything. And they were going to pay me $10,000 for it, but I'd already made $10,000 selling the paperback version. And I'd already had a deal with another publisher to purchase only the hardback rights for like $1,000. And this is The Mason Jar, my very first novel that the major publisher offered me $10,000 for. Now that I've transitioned from writing into filmmaking, I'm very, very glad I never sold that book to that publisher. Because now, in the next few years, we are going to push forward with a feature film, and I wouldn't be able to do that. And you're probably thinking $10,000 does seem like a low number. Why is that? Because I'm not John Grisham. I'm not Judy Blume. If I was a famous author with a large following, I probably would have received a larger amount of money. But what they want to do is, when it comes to your first book, your first novel, they're going to start off with a low amount that they know that they can recoup the cost. And when you become more famous and your books get more out there, they start offering you larger amounts of money. Because the more famous you are, the more likely the bookstore managers are going to put your book on the shelves, and they're going to sell even more copies. It's just the way it is. Are there stories of first-time authors that get a great book deal and become a New York Times bestseller with their very first book? Yeah, but those are an anomaly. I wouldn't even say 1 out of 100. I would say 1 out of a million. What I learned is save up enough money to make it professional. Don't cut corners. You will regret it later if you do. If you are under the age of 30 and you have a great idea for a nonfiction book, I would encourage you to consider turning it into fiction. Turn it into a novel or a novella, which is a short novel, and have the characters teach the audience what you want the audience to understand. That way, if later you disagree with it, those teachings are owned by the characters and not you, and you're not on the hook for it. It's just some words of wisdom that I've learned from experience.